Hello, and welcome to the fourth episode of Let's Talk Media. Today's topic is filmmaking, a lifelong journey with Suzanne Colton. This is a web series produced in partnership with Digital Media Connecticut and a new group of Connecticut women, badass female filmmakers, the BFFs. Through this web series, aspiring filmmakers and media professionals are invited to join Connecticut women in live conversations via YouTube Live about their careers in independent documentary filmmaking. Each episode will feature an hour of conversation, followed by 30 minutes of questions from the virtual audience. That's you. As tonight's episode evolves, please take advantage of the YouTube chat box to submit questions to panelists, actually our keynote speaker tonight, which we will then try to answer during the question and answer section of the evening. Standing by is Professor Heather Elliott Famularo, who is the department head of digital media and design at UConn, and she is the head of this entire enterprise and fearlessly moves us forward so we can talk about media. Let me introduce myself very quickly. I'm Karen Ritzenhoff. I'm a professor in the Department of Communication at Central Connecticut State University, where I teach visual communication and women in film and digital media and cinema classes. Suzanne actually was an auditor in my classes, and she is a feisty, brilliant contributor in our discussions and affiliated with CCSU. Suzanne Colton has a really rich and wonderful career that we are going to explore today. She has worked as a filmmaker, educator, and designer of digital media for the past 40 years. Originally trained at the Rhode Island School of Design, RISD, she has collaborated with many art institutions in Connecticut, among them the Wadsworth Atheneum and Real Artways, where she was an artist in residence. Colton attended Rhode Island School of Design in fall of 1974, majoring in film, as one of only 2 women in a department of 66 men, studying under animator R. Paul Larkin. She continued making films from 1976 to 1978, while working independently at the University of Hartford Art School in the Department of Film and Video. Her film, Icarus, A Violation of the Senses, received the Connecticut Independent Filmmakers Award in 1979 and earned her the title of Filmmaker in Residence at Real Artways. While there, Suzanne and her partner developed a recording studio, Raw Egg Production, which was later featured on PM Magazine, a nationally syndicated television program. Welcome, Suzanne.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm blessed.
So a lot of people might not connect to this term Icarus, and that's the title of your project. Could you tell us a little bit about Icarus, why you picked that name and what it entails?
Sure. Icarus it's a Greek story, Greek myth, and Icarus is the son of Daedalus, and as I remember, they were both imprisoned, and they found a way to escape by creating wings of feathers and wax and flew away. But Icarus was so enamored of flight that he flew too close to the sun and plummeted to the earth into the sea. So my film, Icarus, A Violation of the Senses, deals with a latter-day Icarus character who survives the fall, somewhat like a falling star or an alien landing, perhaps, and now has to navigate through this new world. Icarus is a visitor. And the film deals with sensory overload. You have a character that's like a blank slate and has to navigate through an urban landscape, and the intake, both visually and sensually and auditory, the whole 9 yards, is an overload. So it's a journey. The film.
What is interesting, Suzanne, is that you started shooting this project on film. And now you are actually in the process of digitizing the material, and you have gone through different reiterations. Maybe tell us about this process of revisiting a project that you started in the 70s and that you are now completing.
I think it's been very, very, very exciting, because in the 70s, you know, I had limited access to an editing suite. I had, you know, at the Hartford Art School, I had a small one. Even when I transitioned over to Real Artways, I got to use another filmmaker's editing studio, but it really could not do what my mind's eye was seeing, what I felt the film would look like. And when I was able to have the film digitized and actually go back in and look at it again, I'm like, oh yes, we can make this happen now, because digital is so fluid. And coming from not only, you know, an artistic background, I also was involved with sound. So the whole, to layer up the sound and deal with the soundtrack and just, you know, utilize the sounds that I had heard in my head, you know, that would correlate with the visuals, what you were seeing, and the city sounds and the breathing sounds of and someone walking. I mean, it's all there. So it's very exciting.
So what I think is also wonderful is that you have done a lot of, so to say, preparation for our interview, where you revisited photographs and sound bites and clips, and you have brought many of them for us today. And I wondered if you would like to show a snippet of Icarus for us to get started.
Yes, we can do that.
So this is you.
Yes, it is.
Is there a story about the hat?
Oh, yes. Well, yes. There's a story about the hat and the subsequent suit. You have to remember, it was 1970s. It was easier for me to move around in the city in a suit than, say, in any kind of women's garb. In a suit, I was invisible. I could go anywhere. If I had worn a skirt or anything, it just wouldn't happen. But I really liked the hat.
So I think Professor Elliott is going to start. Yes. I think there is no sound as of yet.
There should be sound. Yeah. There was sound.
It could be, Heather, that you have to unmute yourself. That sometimes happens. I've been Zooming so much with my students that I want to mute myself, and then the sound gets lost. But let's talk a little bit about what we just saw. It's a black and white film. It's an urban landscape. Are you Icarus?
Yes, I am. And it was at the time, you know, being sort of a lean filmmaker, I knew that I could count on myself to show up and do the character part. And what I did was I had many camera people, and I trained a lot of camera people, but I was very, you know, meticulous about the shots I wanted. So maybe similar to other directors, I'd set up the shots.
Or there's the sound.
Taste it, feel it, grace it, sugar. It melts away. It is real. It is not my imagination. It is not induced. There's something in the city, something that triggers. There is history involved. There are reasons. I'm pushing my senses. I'm pushing my body. I'm pushing myself. There's a mastering process involved here. Many levels. This is not magic. This is not something that is just happening. There is control. This is not sorcery with final implications. This is not final. I have say. This is not solid to you. I must proceed with caution from here on in. There's too much at stake. I'm trusting my intuition, and I feel exposure. But what will be the full outcome? I must continue to hold a logical position, no matter what. There are reasons. There are reasons why. I realize this. All things have movement of some sort. Mobility plays an intrinsic part in almost everything. I wish to know how I arrived here. You slipped through. You are open. Your energy moves rapidly. Your receptiveness was your transport. Look to the mirrors. They are both transmitters and receivers. You are not in isolation. I wish to explore.
Suzanne, tell us about the imagery that you picked when you diverge from the street and you go inside. That's really fascinating. It's like it's like the inside of a kaleidoscope where you suddenly see a different world and it's all broken up.
Yes, yes. That was very, very intentional, so that you have a sense uh, of multidimensional, of many images and layering, and you don't know exactly where you are. And so it's a sense to create a sense of ambiguity as far as who where is Icarus? Is Icarus talking to an internal consciousness? You know, there's an outside and an inside. So the outside is what Icarus sees of the city. The inside is what Icarus is processing. And so I wanted it very, very different. And I utilized black and white to my advantage. And I used high contrast black and white film, which gave you very good whites and very good blacks. And the other set, if you will, is supposed to create a sense of not knowing if you're right side up or upside down and where you are. And this continues.
So, Suzanne, in the women's movement, there was this notion the personal is public, or that you talk about the inner world, but it's also relevant politically. I think it's interesting that you start this little expose with the flaneur, with the woman Icarus walking on the street, and then you go into this inner space that is looking different, but it's also your interior world, right? As Icarus, is these kind of different intersecting narratives that are in your head.
Yes, yes. So the film does address movement and the process of thought, and what we visually intake and what we auditorily intake, and thought processes and how they move and how we move through space and how light falls upon us and how, it really deals with the senses. So the soundtrack has many layers. And so you're going to hear multiple voices, but it's everything that the character's experiencing. So you may hear things that are purely on a sensorial level, like it's cold, or I smell roasting chestnuts. I can feel the cold through my feet, or that sort of thing. Yeah.
I find it interesting when we started to talk. You said that Icarus is, so to say, a character who comes from somewhere else, who is daring and has wings. And when I look at this still also black and white of you looking onto a meadow, that reminds me that you said that you were always a bit of an Icarus in your life, that also in middle school and high school you were exploring and you were daring. You mentioned that your father gave you a camera when you were only 8 years old. Tell us tell us a little bit about that and take us back into your childhood, what that was like to be a budding artist, so to say, in a rural Connecticut community.
Oh, there was a lot of exploring. I grew up in Windsor, and when I grew up, Windsor was quite more rural than it is now. And Windsor has a long, long history. This is a really good slide to have up. It has a long history of being somewhat eerie. So Windsor is known for the arsenic and old lace murders of Mrs. Gilligan, who poisoned a lot of older gentlemen and took all their cash while having them stay in a retirement home. Windsor also was the first town in New England to hang a witch, and they hung a witch at least 40 years before the Salem witch trials, which is interesting. But yes, I was given a camera when I was 8 years old, and I just took that camera everywhere. I took it into the woods. I took it through the town. An aunt gave me a small portable tape recorder, so now I had ways to, gather sounds, a little tiny microphone. So it just made sense that I was leaning towards film at a very, very early age. By middle school, there was a film department. I was lucky that film was an elective, an English elective. You could take it in middle school, which I did. And so we were making films, but I found out that the young men from middle school, young boys, I should say, they had a film club of which I could not join. And they got use of the film equipment, and I was sort of shut out. So as I grew older, and by the time I was 14 or 15, I had lied about my age, and I went to work, and I bought my own film camera.
Oh, that's an incredible story. I mean, in some ways, we talked about this also during the pandemic. Suzanne, you got an art award that is very prestigious to continue your work. But even then, it was difficult at this time in your professional career to get your hands on the equipment you need to complete your work. And that was something that kind of weaves in and out of your story, because also at RISD, this was a very male-oriented place, and you have mentioned to fellow students that it wasn't easy to get your hands on equipment, which had a huge effect on the kind of work you ended up doing.
Yes. So when I was at RISD, excuse me, I was studying under R. Paul Larkin, who was an animator, and so he was interested in animation, and so to fulfill requirements, I did a rotoscoped film of a choreographed modern dance piece that I did myself, and was able to do a lot with that. But then I wanted to move into live action, and Professor Larkin had just no interest. So in order to stay in the department, I relied on my Super 8 camera. There was 16 millimeter cameras there. You couldn't really sign them out and you definitely couldn't sign them out, particularly if you were a woman. You had to have an upperclassman sign out equipment for you, and he had to attend to you when you were shooting. So it was totally by their schedule and what they wanted to do. So it was very difficult, but I created my own workaround. The still you're seeing is a piece that I created where I did some stop motion, and there'll be another one where I did pixelated live animation as well. So,
Lady in White, that's lovely.
yes.
So this is not you. This is actually a model, right?
Yes. Yes.
So as a somebody, so to say, who looks this on, you use a lot of jump cuts and very interesting independent style editing and lighting. So it's considered an art film, isn't it?
Yes, yes. I will say that starting out as, a trained artist, painting and drawing and such, I just found them moving towards film was like painting with light, I like to say. I always, just thrill over what good light can do. This particular film, the achievement I wanted to do was to use the sunlight and the shadow, and also to create an internal fade to white, because it's a vision in white. And there's a little poem at the beginning which I wrote, and I was lucky to have this model.
And tell us about this shoot.
This shoot was done in Providence for Professor Larkin's class. And this is a take on a 20s silent film. And I actually did pixelation. So you shot your subject as well as you shot black paper in between. And you'll get a flickering effect. Again, I like to play with mirrors. I like the focus on multiple images.
It's a very nostalgic piece. It has this kind of old world feel, so to say, with the decorum and the props. You know what this reminds me of too, Suzanne, is the idea of in early silent cinema, you also had, so to say, this cinema of attraction that was very self-indulgent. You know, the fact that she is looking into the mirror, it's a little bit like my teenage daughter taking selfies
Yes.
all the time.
Yes.
But it's also a statement about womanhood or femininity. So were you already a feminist then in the 70s?
Yes. Yes, definitely so. So, yes, we set this up. I will say a short piece like this took an entire day. We started in the morning and we ended up with eating dinner together. It was, yep. This helped me with fulfill my animation piece at RISD. It was live action, stop motion, a pixelated film, which counted as animation. That and my rotoscoping, I was all set with animation. Yeah.
Excellent. So tell us about this slide.
Okay. So this is from a newspaper clipping, and this is me with the Canon camera. And I can talk about two things about this. One being that the town of Windsor asked me to do a historical short of the town. And so here I am with my Super 8 camera. And we should go back to the other slide for a minute. Yeah. So I was asked to do a historical short, which I proceeded to do with my little camera. And I went all around town. And there was a house in the center of Windsor known as the Huntington House. And it's a beautiful old house. And I banged on the front door to ask permission, and no one answered. So I started filming, and I came around to the side of the house, and there was this big bow window. And so I peered in. And so as I peered in, there was a huge dining room with a canvas ceiling with blue sky and cupids, and a table set for 12, all this elegant china and glassware. At the end of the table was what I perceived as a half-naked little old man with his bowl of cornflakes and a glass quart bottle of milk. And before I could slip away, he spotted me and came out a side door and asked me what I was doing. And I said I was making a historical film for the town of Windsor. He asked me in, and I did go in. And he showed me all his fine antiques and art collection.
But you were not supposed to film. He told you that this was a secret and he didn't want you to
Yes,
film.
yes. So there was one more secret with the house. He says, you're not to tell anyone that what you've seen in my house. He says, I like to share my beauty and, as far as my artwork and my collection. But he says, no one should know what's inside this house. You have to promise, which I did. I never filmed the inside. It wasn't talked about for years. But there is a backstory with the house.
Yeah.
House, yes. Clark Huntington had an older brother, and he died very mysteriously. It's still an open, cold case for the town of Windsor. It goes back to maybe 1914, somewhere around there. Yes, still unsolved. There are people out there that are still looking to solve this case.
That's also interesting. I mean, that's another genre that is always so popular, this kind of suspense and horror genre that was also even during the silent period already very, very popular. Let us go back to RISD very quickly. Do you have any memories that you would like to share about this time that made you stronger as a filmmaker?
Sure. I would say that, as a filmmaker, if you want to make films, you find a way to make films. So at RISD, it was hard to get equipment, but it wasn't, totally off limits if you knew which way to handle it. So I found out that a friend of mine, a woman in ceramics, as an upper class person, could sign out equipment if she had a reason to do so. So she would come with me and she'd sign out the equipment, and she was in ceramics, and she says, well, we want to document a new ceramics technique that we're doing in the ceramics studio, so I need equipment. So she'd sign it out and give it to me, and then I was able to do what I wanted to do. I was not going to have it. If you need tools, you need access to your tools.
I think that's a huge lesson to take away from today's interview. Let's go to the University of Hartford. You were there, and tell us a little bit about this time at the art school. You were shooting in Hartford and Boston in the 1970s for your film. Tell us a little bit about this experience.
Oh, it was great. When I became involved with the Hartford Art School, it was very different from RISD in the fact that I had access to whatever I wanted. All the 16 millimeter equipment, the studios, anything that I wanted. And so this is where I actually started filming Icarus. So in the 70s, these are two clips from the film when I was shooting in Boston and in Hartford. And the different things that I encountered while I was in both of the cities. The shoots were long. It was difficult. It was winter. Oftentimes we had the very small crew I had with me, we had to keep an eye on the equipment at all times. Rather funny story was I got a call one time from a fellow filmmaker from Hartford Art School asking me why the Hartford Police Department was calling him at 3 a.m. And I'm like, they called you at 3 a.m? He says, yes, something about a missing light meter. And I'm like, missing? And so during one of our shoots in Hartford, I was wearing this sort of boxy suit, and it was nighttime, and I was on the streets, and at some point someone picked my pocket and took the light meter, but then that person got caught and had to spill all the goods and give them to the Hartford Police Department. So it was difficult shooting in the cities still, even dressed in a suit. In the 70s in Hartford, streets were barren except for people that, maybe did not always have the best intentions. But the city was beautiful to shoot. So, and this is what I wanted. So I used the cityscape of Hartford and Boston. at the same time too, another fellow filmmaker, Gary Hogan, who was at Hartford Art School, he signed me up for a workshop at Kent School for Boys so that I could gain access to their editing equipment because it was much better than what Hartford Art School had. And so he just failed to give my name. So I showed up at the workshop, and of course I was the only young woman there. And I got to use the equipment for a week. And there were some heated debates with other young male filmmakers there too, which wound up them saying to me that, it really didn't matter because by the end of the week I would be gone. But it was one more week where I had access to better equipment, could do a little bit more with Icarus, and my fellow filmmaker Gary Hogan just roared with laughter. He was just so pleased with himself that he sent a woman to a boys' school.
Yeah, that is wonderful. So was Real Artways a break in some ways? You were the artist in residence. It's a place that still has an incredible aura of artistry and combines filmmaking with exhibits in the gallery and social events. Tell us what was Real Artways like in the 70s, and have they stayed close to their mission?
Sure, we can go to the next slide. You'll see the players at Real Artways, so to speak. If we go to the next, yeah, we're all sitting on the stairwell. So this is all the artists that were then living at Real Artways. I'm in the foreground.
Are you the one in the middle?
In the middle, yes, that's me. The woman to the left was with a early video company called Montevideo, and my partner Rick is to the right, and then the rest of the artists are up the staircase. I gained residency based on the film Icarus. So my fellow filmmaker Gary Hogan, who already had an editing studio at Real Artways, presented my film privately to the director and the other artists in residence. And based upon that film, I was voted in. At that time, Real Artways was known as the New England Center for New and Experimental Art. So we had a lot of people come through. We had Philip Glass and Steve Reich, Laurie Anderson, Stan Brackage, David Van Tighem, and my partner and I, we developed an in-house 8-track recording studio called Raw Egg Studio. And it gathered its name because we literally took a space in Real Artways and covered it with egg cartons. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see it was all egg cartons, which we used as sound baffling.
Yes, I was thinking about this. Suzanne, you said something earlier that I found really beautiful, and it's also resonating with this slide. Painting with light. You used also very experimental ways of recording music. You used electronic music. I loved that you mentioned when we talked earlier that Laurie Anderson also, as a performance artist, used to layer different, so to say, surfaces on top of each other. So maybe it would be interesting to reflect on this collaboration with Laurie Anderson, how she influenced you, what you remember of her time at Real Artways, and how that shaped your own identity.
Well, I know that the year, this is 1979, so she performed on Saturday, December 8th, 1979. I know that the year before she had an exhibition at the Wadsworth Atheneum, a one-woman show. She came to Real Artways on that Saturday morning. What I remember the most was that there was supposed to be a music intern, if you will. He was supposed to go and gather her up at the train station in Hartford at Union Station, and no one went and got her.
Oh, my goodness.
So at some point, I remember looking out the front windows onto Asylum Street and seeing this very slender person with like a little wagon, but it was a custom wagon. It was all black, and it was all compartmentalized, and she was tugging at it up the hill, up Asylum Street, and it was Laurie Anderson. She referred to her little wagon as her Pandora's box, and she had everything. She had in the picture, she's playing a violin, and she calls it self-played violin, and she would wire the instrument and then have it trigger tape decks. So instead of getting a violin sound, you would get maybe her voice or a flute sound or what have you. But she didn't stop there. She didn't just stop with the sound. She was working with videotaping, and then doing videotaping, live performances, and creating what they call a video loop. So you would get an echo. So you'd hear something, and then again, you'd hear it a few seconds later. And you'd see it. You'd see it immediately, and then it would wrap around, and the video actually would echo. She would use light and film projectors on her body. And it was an incredible performance. I worked with her the entire day to make sure that everything was going to be set up the way she wanted, and such an inspiration.
You also incorporated some of this experimental visual and auditory experience and montage into your own work. We saw the first clip of Icarus at the beginning of our talk. How do you think does it play nowadays? Which parts of that kind of visual and auditory experience would you like to preserve as you are now working on completing Icarus?
I would say that again, by being digital, the field, if you will, is more wide open. So, for example, with the soundtrack, I've been able to, back in the 70s, you had to build your own sound libraries. Now, digitally, you can get just about, any sound you want.
Yes.
And then as far as the visuals, you can make cuts down to half seconds now. So it's just going to bring, I think, Icarus full circle, and it's just going to bloom. And I'm having the time of my life dealing with the digital aspect.
Let's talk about this band. That is really cool.
Okay. What happened was we continued to make films at Real Artways, and we presented films, and then we started exploring the recording studio aspect more and more at sound. And then we started playing with the sound and turning it into electronic music. And then we got this great idea to start performing live with electronic music and also video and film presentations. So in this, you can see that there's a lot of electronics on stage. The netting in the back was actually a screen, and we'd always open the show with behind the screen. And you would have side lighting, and you would have film being projected while the musicians were also performing. So you got that montaged effect. What Laurie Anderson had said, and I will have to agree, back in those days, you could do really, really beautiful presentations, but video, like there's a video camera on this slide in the behind, and this woman is working both the presentation, the projections, and the lighting. The video still couldn't pick it up and do it really justice. So those memories they're very much still very brilliant, but they were very hard to document. This is that's a projection. That's a front lit projection along with the stage lighting. In the corner is another projection, and there's another slide of that. So some of it was captured. So in this particular presentation, this show, if you will, we had artists up on stage painting while film was being projected on top of them. This is an image of playing behind the screen. And so as you can see, you're getting echoey images. And during the performance, it was a lot brighter, if you will. So, but also it was very, very atmospheric.
I like it because in some ways it has this music video aesthetic that we are used to, you know, similar to your first experimental film looking a little bit like selfies. You could think that this is also visually really attractive because it pushes the boundaries of representation and what you're used to look at. One of the things that I noticed is that you also were invited to the Wadsworth Atheneum and you did projections and light shows in a sci-fi context. So what was that about?
Okay, we can move along a little bit with the slides. So this is the name of the band. This is a hand-created slide that went into a projector and was projected. This is the band that I was working with. I would say me and my partner were very, very fortunate to work with these young gentlemen. They were fabulous musicians. And what we were able to bring to them was the ability to be very creative rather than have to be in a structured form.
Suzanne, were you in that picture? If we go back, Heather, are you the one on the left?
That's me.
That's you. And this looks like a dystopic container. It started out of Gilliam sci-fi.
Yes.
Where is this?
Yes,
Or is
it was actually we shot on location. We shot at a steel foundry refinery plant that we had access to, sort of. We'll just but it sort of leads into working on a live score for Metropolis. So which we did.
Incredible.
We were working with this company who was supplying us with a videotape. Back at that point, video VCR players were not for public consumption. You had to go to an audio-visual company and rent them. Then you had to rent the video. And so we would play the video along, and this is the score for the film Metropolis. And we worked very hard on it. We worked on it for about a year. And we got a call from IRS Records out in LA, and they wanted us to come out. So we did. And we were there for a brief time. And when we came back, we found that Giorgio Moroder had got a hold of all the rights for Fritz Lang's Metropolis. And so that just sort of ended that. But I think the takeaway is that right now there are films that are touring with live orchestras, like live scores. And
it's a wonderful part of this story of silent movies. And I just covered Metropolis last week in a film history class, and also said that it's really anticipating this idea of the cyborg and AI and the female robot, like Ex Machina and Ghost in a Shell, and you know, her. So in some ways you really were a trailblazer in your work, that you embraced artistic projects that are still incredibly relevant nowadays for film students.
Yes, and I would encourage them to push the limits, the limits of their craft, you know, and be open to exploring all the time. Okay, so this is 1984. George Orwell's 1984, as the Wadsworth Atheneum perceived it. This was the invitation. And so I believe it was, the 21st of January, 1984. And so the Wadsworth Atheneum approached us to custom design sound and light installations for 3 of the museum's rooms. So there are some slides of the drawings that we did. And I think the interesting part again was that we had all these light sculptures, and they were triggered by hidden microphones. So guests were coming to this event, and they would walk in, and just their voice would activate something, and so lights would go on and off, and it was all kind of mysterious and very Orwellian. You know, your voice was being monitored, you were being monitored, the whole presentation was being monitored. And to this day, Wadsworth Atheneum has recorded the entire event, and it's in a time capsule.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. So this is yet another design for the light organ panels that we had to custom design to turn the lights on and off. And so it was all electronics. And so it was a big hit. You know, we had 400 people. And
fabulous.
So this is a little bit of the band, and we can have the volume. Yeah, we can listen, and we can have the volume on low. But this was shooting in, I would say this was also 1984.
And you are singing.
Yes.
Suzanne, you were the only female band member?
Yes. Seems to be the story of my life. I got to know quite a few gentlemen, musicians,
so
filmmakers.
I hope it's not indiscreet if I say this, that you have adult children who are also watching us right now.
Right.
So to say, did your son Ian, who works in the industry, that when he sees those images of you, what is his reaction when he sees mommy on the microphone swinging with a bunch of guys? What does he tell you?
I think he says, Mom, you were a pioneer. I look at these musicians as they were all really, really, really very fine, and continue to be very fine gentlemen, very, very talented, very supportive. And we were more like a family. We looked out for one another. It didn't really, me being a woman, it really didn't, it was an area where it didn't matter. I was there for my voice and for, what I could bring to the table musically and artistically. And there was a certain amount of respect for that, but there weren't a lot of women. No. So this is still of the synthesizers that I did use, and this is a studio shot. We did go into the studio, and we cut an entire album, and that's the album. I will say that this particular band, we were approached by United Technologies in Hartford to become involved with Hartford's first night, which I think might have been in 1988, I think was the first night in Hartford. And our thought was to perform live and have a laser light show that would have been put on the heliport of UTC, and we were going to project film images all over Hartford's buildings. And we were almost there until UTC did some background checks. They're kind of with the military. And when they couldn't figure out exactly who we were, they were like, no.
Not you. But look at this poster: photo projections, special effect generators, full star fields, video beams, live psychedelic music in wraparound stereo and place. I mean, what I love about this, Suzanne, is that this is right here in Connecticut. So
yes,
you are really badass. This is how we called ourselves the badass female filmmakers, but this idea that this was, so to say, homegrown, and that you
Yes.
push the boundaries of visual representation, and how you merge music with visuals, and that you, so to say, also got into conflict with some of the powers that be, but thankfully Real Artways gave you, so to say, the space to spread your wings as an Icarus.
As an Icarus, yes, yes, indeed. And I would say even the planetarium. The planetarium was thrilled to have a live performance, and the planetarium was a beautiful place for us to play. The lighting was right. The film projectors worked better. All the projections. It was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful experience. These are all hand-done slides. These were projected.
And
So,
these are made by you.
yes, yeah.
So this is where your art background, all these different interests constantly merge to come together.
Yes. Yeah. This is probably one of the last performances we did in 1987 at Trinity College, and we were opening for a band called Mission of Burma, and Roger Miller. And after this, I was doing corporate work. But in between doing corporate work, I was also having ideas of doing like an underground TV show. So there was a TV station in New London, and we could show that clip. Yeah, here's the TV stopped acting, boring and stupid. So,
I mean, as a media scholar, I think this is eye candy. It's unbelievable to see this. It's fantastic.
You ready?
We're ready.
Okay, tonight's the first show live wire video. I'm nervous. Are you all right? Right. Okay, sit down. Okay, listen, we got our singer hall to the right of us, right? Right. We got Dennis Miller to the left of us, right? Left. Okay. What do they have that we don't?
Cars, man, women, money.
Let's do it anyways, right?
Right.
Okay.
Space travel. So there's a missile taking off. This is very playful. Suzanne, tell us what was the context for this TV program?
Okay, well, I would say that, like I had mentioned before, I would consider myself an outsider filmmaker. So that means that you're going to use the equipment you have access to, and you're going to push it beyond its own boundaries. Also at that time, this would have been between 1990 and 91, there was a push for what they call underground video, similar to like pirate TV or
yes, that's exactly what it reminded me of. Pirate TV, I've seen that.
Yeah. Or like early days at SCTV. Okay, so we had comedy, we had national performing acts. We made no bones about shooting, with what we had. So, it was very, very edgy, if you will. And low budget. Even the title song, we put the crew together and we just said, sing like Cookie Monster.
Yeah.
Sing like Cookie Monsters. We did it was it was always about parody and satire and just fun. And we went to WTXX out of Waterbury, which is a Connecticut broadcast TV station. For the students that don't know, a broadcast station means it covers the entire state. They said no. They said no. A local show will never make it. We'll never know. Go away. So then we took it to WTWS, which is Channel 6 out of New London. And they were in an independent Connecticut broadcasts network. So that meant they didn't have like an NBC affiliation or CBS. They were independent. So I could compare it to, bringing it to Channel 26 out of New London was kind of like having your own YouTube channel. So we did the show and we did it, pilot series, ran for 6 weeks. I wanted to know if we were going to get Nielsen ratings, so I would have to call the Fox network to find out, which I did. And after the first show, we had over 60,000 households. So that's 240,000 people watching. And we strategically placed ourselves right between Dennis Miller and Arsenio Hall. So it was 11 to midnight, and we continued to get good ratings. That's
an extraordinary
really
story.
wonderful.
I'm also thinking, Suzanne, that there was this idealism that if you sort of say had the fantasy and the drive, you could co-opt cable television and make it your community outlet. And in some ways, like you mentioned, the social media is doing that. You now have people who produce videos on low budget and get picked up by music companies. So in some ways, you can see that this idea of being empowered by having access to the technology, even today, works in ways that is reminiscent of what you did in the 90s there, that it's kind of democratizing access to representation.
Yes, I would have to agree. We had we were lucky too that I managed a good cross promotion for this show. So I made sure that the Hartford Current and the Hartford Advocate knew about the show and incorporated, music writers and arts writers as much as possible. We also worked with WHCN, which is a FM radio station. And they were willing to give us advertising and do interviews with members of the cast and crew, as well as the national performers. And so it was a very, very, very good relationship. It worked like a charm.
I have never asked you about the age of your children, but did that start there, that you also had to, so to say, be a professional artist and take care of your babies? Is that around this time when you also, so to say,
yes,
navigating all these different responsibilities?
Yes, they were older by the time Livewire Video came about. My son Ian was born in 1983, so the band was still together. So he was a band baby. Yeah. And when I would go on film shoots, often the children would accompany me. In regards to Livewire Video, I remember getting a call from my daughter's kindergarten teacher saying, your daughter keeps telling me she goes to London every Tuesday. She says, are you flying to London? I'm like, well, I said, New London. I said, yeah, we deliver an episode of Livewire Video every Tuesday. We make the trip. So
I love this. That I hope that your kids, in addition to the audience members today, will also have some more questions to follow up. I think we have only a little bit of a window left to before we want to turn it over to questions and answers. So tell us where Icarus is now and what this mysterious red button, play button, means, what you're going to show us next.
Oh, okay. Well, this is a good example of film and sound relationship.
Yes.
So if Heather could maybe bring the volume up a little, you will see between the intercutting of the film and the intercutting of sound, how you develop a rhythm, a sense of rhythm, and how it's a marriage of the two.
I am carrying information.
So this is Icarus. I recognize it.
Yes.
I don't understand. I'm carrying information. I don't remember. I'm carrying information. I don't understand. You were notified. I don't remember. There was a message. I was very young. I didn't make the connection. I thought the dog was. I thought the dog was. I thought the dog was. It's important that you understand. I'm carrying the dog was messenger of the spirit. This you must accept. The dog was messenger of the spirit. This you must accept. From where? What spirit? From where? What spirit? I don't understand. You were notified. I don't understand. You were notified. I don't remember. There was a messenger. And that was the messenger of the spirit. This you must accept. Going down to the city. Shake hands with pretty people. Come, exit to the streets. Come on.
Suzanne, tell
Yes.
us where you're going to take Icarus now. Are you reshooting some of the scenes as a flaneur in Boston and Hartford? Are you um, recording new soundscapes? What is your, so to say, current frame of mind?
Um, for right now, I'm just about to the point where I've finished the editing of the film. The soundtrack has been expanded, if you will, because like I said, I can now do the things that I would have had to run around like crazy to gather up the sounds that I needed, you know, in the field to, but now it's much more accessible. My thought is to finish the film and screen it. And then there is definitely a second part to this project that I won't entirely disclose, but it should be a lot of fun. So it's coming along. I'm happy with it. In this particular piece too, if you noticed, you had the cutting between shooting from the inside out and then shooting from the outside in. And you have the rhythm of the character walking, and you have the shift of the angle of the camera, and then you have the bombardment of the sounds. You know, there are internal sounds and then there's external sounds. And so it's a real marriage, if you will. I love the idea.
So we have several questions from the audience,
Oh.
which I will also like to post, but I have one more question for you before we shift gears, so to say. I find it absolutely fascinating that you are looking at yourself in this film from the 1970s. What does it evoke when you are on the cutting table and you, so to say, look at your former self here, this badass flaneur who with her hat? What kind of sensations do you have working, so to say, with this mirror image of your younger self?
It's been a journey in and of itself. You know, I look at this face from 40 years ago, and I can still I see determination in that face.
Absolutely.
The same that I see determination in my face when I look in the mirror. So it's in some ways it is kind of haunting to see your former, your younger self, but with the ferocity in that face, it's just like it's encouraging that this is just another phase from my life, and that you still need to just roll forward. you know.
And it's interesting because it was very intimate when you started it, because you were acting in your own film. And so in some ways it makes sense that you still hold the reins. You know, you don't have to evoke another actress. You can also, so to say, you still rely on yourself. Are you planning, even if you don't want to reveal it, that you um, are going to contrast it with your life now? Because I look at these images, I can see the photograph and I can see you, Suzanne, on my little Zoom window, and I recognize the same woman. It's the same mouth, the same look that I so enjoy, and the same determination. Is that something that you could envision, that you do this kind of back and forth also between now and then?
Yes, yeah, I think so. I think that's all part of the journey. So going back and forth, you know, within the film, and then dealing it with it now. It's it just has expanded the journey. I can't really phrase it any other way. It will be very exciting for the next steps that I wish to take with the film. And I think that the relationship of where I was then and where I am now, what I will bring to Icarus as a 64-year-old, I think will only improve. So.
Beautiful. Carol Evans is asking you what you enjoy most about the process of filmmaking.
Oh, I think I'm one of those women that I really enjoy being behind the camera. I was meant to be behind the camera. Even with my little iPhone, you know, if I see the light just right out in my limited travels, I'm one to have to capture it. So I love the process of holding onto that camera and capturing images, capturing light. And so I would say that is very attractive to me. But then the whole process of editing, it's like you then take this raw, like baby, you know, this young, like little child of a film, and then you bring it into the editing suite, and then you work your magic, and it becomes, you know, something bigger and stronger, and you having that control the same way you have control over a camera. I find it very attractive. You know, editing is it's an art in and of itself. So I appreciate what Carol does for sure.
That's also wonderful that we are, so to say, exploring in Let's Talk Media this incredible volume of expertise and knowledge that is here in Connecticut that we can share with our students. And that goes actually along with one of the questions that Professor Heather Elliott Famularo is posing. She is the department head of digital media and design at UConn, and kind of the brainchild behind this series. And she's asking, what are your tips for young female filmmakers today? What do you want them to take away, so to say, from tonight?
I think that probably still very much young female filmmakers are still having a rough time of it, being taken seriously, and maybe there's still some restrictiveness being a woman and having a sense of being in school not how can I put this, not having the same respect as your male counterpart students, you know, that you're maybe not capable of handling that equipment. So I would say to young female filmmakers that you go in with one foot forward and you just say, I need what I need and I'm here to make films, and that's what I'm going to do. I think you have to be somewhat aggressive, but you can be aggressive with a respectfulness about you and a dignity that you deserve to make films, and you deserve to be able to use equipment, and you need to be taught too. You can't have professors, if you will, doing the work for you. You know, I think it requires a lot to be a film production professor. You have to have a lot of patience. So I would say for women too, they have to have a lot of patience and a lot of determination that they need to get what they need out of being a film student.
Yes, and this is also what I love so much, that in this group of BFFs, they are such incredible women activists who are filmmakers and educators,
Yes.
who are, so to say, training the next generations, because there are still so few women filmmakers who actually break into the mainstream, which may explain why you are also drawn to experimental films. So I wanted to ask you, on whose shoulders are you standing? So to say, who are the women like Maya Deren or Chantal Ackerman? Who are some of the experimental filmmakers that you were inspired by?
Definitely by Maya Deren, I would have to say. You know, she was incredible. She had a rich body of work, you know, going back to the early 1940s. She also was a choreographer. You know, I think she may have been a musician as well. So she just took all of the various aspects of talents that she had, and I think similar to myself, she put all those talents to work in film. And that is the beauty of film, is to be able to utilize all your talents, and it can all go into a film. So yes.
That's actually one of the questions also that comes from the audience. Tracy is asking, what other inspirations for your editing style and your piece comes from other arts, or what kind of other influences have you been, so to say, inspired by? And we know that Laurie Anderson was a huge impact, who was also at Real Artways. What are some of the other art forms that you so to say, took in like a sponge while you're surrounded by other artists?
I would say sound was a big part. So I mean, experimenting with sound and experimenting with light.
Yes.
A lot, and utilizing sound as in performance pieces, you know, electronic music, sound libraries. I mean, in the performance pieces that we did live with the band, I mean, we developed like what they called pre-sampling devices. So we had a tape recall machine that was fed little cassettes of sounds, everything from Ronald Reagan to toilets flushing. And when you activated a button, you could play it like a percussive piece. It would give you little bursts of toilet or Ronnie, or, you know, I don't know, television. So I was very attracted to experimenting with the camera and getting the most I could out of it, as well as building sound devices that we would then use for both film soundtracks and for live performances. I don't know if that.
You know what, Suzanne,
edit.
looking at your work tonight and seeing, so to say, this enormous breadth of creativity, do you feel that maybe that is lacking in contemporary film culture, this energy or this desire to experiment and break the boundaries? Agnesh is asking you, so to say, who are contemporary filmmakers and artists that you still get jolts off or out of, or get inspiration from? What are some of the contemporary people that you find invigorating?
Oh, let's see. Well, I can give you a woman producer, Christine Vachon, and her whole bevy of films that she produced. You know, I shot Andy Warhol and Hedwig and the Angry Inch. I mean, she is dealing with subject matter that is very, very, you know, on the edge. and we're moving more and more forward. So I can appreciate the production that she's put behind, and a number of the films were done by women directors. So I have a very soft spot for her in my heart, because she's carrying, she's making sure that other women directors are getting their chance and their voices are being heard and their films are getting made.
When you think about art movements, and you had to describe, so to say, where you belong, could you find a home in art movements where you belonged? Is it the avant-garde? Is it?
I think I fell between avant-garde and the new emerging, I'd say, outsider underground filmmakers. So it was during the time of punk and new wave as well. So there was a lot of angst, if you will, going on in the late 70s, early 80s. And then, there was the edginess, the rawness. So things were not polished, there were, and the more unpolished they were, I guess in some circles, the more they were accepted. I think I fell into that area as an avant-garde. So, my pieces were pushing envelopes, if you will, that others weren't touching. And we Hartford at that time had a real background sort of had a pulse. There was a pulse on Hartford because at that time the curator of the Wadsworth was an acquaintance or partner with Mapplethorpe.
Oh,
so
yes.
yeah, so
You mentioned that. That's fascinating.
yeah, so there were a whole bunch of people that were slipping in and out of Hartford, just to see what the art scene and the music scene, people like Patti Smith and members of the Sex Pistols. I mean, there were people that would just sort of, Hartford was the place to go where you really didn't have, no one was going to blow your cover, and you could just slip in and slip out and see all this new art and listen to all this new music and see all these new and experimental things, and then take it back to, say, the city, to New York, and then do what you will with it.
Has that been an attraction, this proximity to New York? Did you participate in some form in the New York scene, or you just described that New York was coming to you, that New York was coming to Hartford?
There were times where I was in and out of the city. I know that all the film developing, I would have to ride the train into New York with Icarus, these big film reels. Yes. And carry them and take a cab right directly, because they would only take cash. And so I'd have a lot of cash in my pocket and a film reel this big, and I'd ride in a cab to this film production company. And so I was in and out of the city. The city then was very, very different, very different. There were still parts of, say, Brooklyn where the buildings were very bombed out from the riots in the 60s. So it was a very, very surreal place to visit back in the 70s, New York. I appreciated that. I was like, wow, okay, there is a lot going on here. One of my very favorite scenes is coming in on the train and seeing a pack of dogs running from the streets into an abandoned building. And because of all the windows were knocked out, you could see the dogs traveling from floor to floor. And when I looked very carefully, there was a white German Shepherd sitting on the very top roof on the corner of the building that looked like a gargoyle. And I'm like, the dogs have taken over the buildings in New York. Have.
And this could be one of your films. It's really interesting that you can visualize the way you discuss it. Suzanne, one of the things that I love about you is that you are still so to say, an adventurer. You're still an Icarus who flies in and out of people's lives, and you have audited classes at Central Connecticut State University. When you, so to say, interact with the young students who, so to say, are younger than your own children, what do you think, do you see in this generation? Do you feel that they have that drive that you had when you were in school? Do you think they are more cautious? Could you think of somebody who would also push the envelope like you did? Or
I
what are
think
sort of your impressions of this generation?
I think that my involvement with the students in some of the classes that I've audited, I think maybe I've surprised them. They see this older woman in class, and pretty gutsy, pretty fearless. I see in the students a lot of caution, and I think what I do think is that by being an older woman and just speaking my mind, I think I noticed that the other students were like, whoa, if this older woman can say what she wants to say, perhaps we can too. So I hope I bring that to the table, because I feel that students right now have been brought up to be more cautionary. And I think if you're going to push to make films, you have to be beyond being cautionary. I think you have to speak your truth. And I think you have to have a vision, and you have to stand behind it, and you have to have a voice. So if anything, I would like to be able to make them more comfortable with their voices and just say what they have to say.
Do you think that the 70s allowed you to verbalize, even though you had these struggles of getting access to equipment, and we saw in all the images that you shared with us tonight that you were really the exotic bird in the midst of the band members and these very kind of male dominated environments, even though you raved about the fellow musicians and applauded them for their talent. Do you think that if you were, so to say, 24 today, what do you think would be different?
I think what would be different is that I think in some senses for women, I think we've come further in the sense that there is, I find with the younger male students that I interacted with at CCSU, that they are much more respectful, and I think they take their female students a lot more seriously. Not to say that I was not taken seriously within my own realm of people that I was working with. I was, because I had to make things happen. They were the musicians and my partner was a musician, but I had to make these things happen. So I was an organizer, and so I was respected for that. And it really didn't matter if I was a woman or if I wasn't. So as a 24-year-old woman today, I think I might have a bit more of an edge, not necessarily with my colleagues, because they would accept me for who I am,
Yeah.
I think. But I think I'd have more of an edge when I had to branch, blossom some more, because things have changed for women. So I would say that they have more at their disposal than I did at that time, I should say.
I want to end, so to say, on a private note, Suzanne. Not only am I mesmerized by your story, but also the fact that your two adult children are looking onto their mother with pride and so to say, have supported you in putting these memories together and doing this trip for us into your creative past. How have your children taken on this legacy of their fearless mother? I think I remember that Ian is in the industry, that he is in California.
Yes, yeah, he is. He's out in LA and he is an animator. And my daughter in the same breath is a writer. So my children collaborate with one another a lot. She is a history teacher in Massachusetts, and her students adore her because she brings a whole new level to history class. And
Oh, you
so,
have mentioned her many times, that how brave she is and how amazing she
yeah,
works with students. So in that way, she's an educator also with a mission who makes a difference.
right. But she's also an accomplished writer and poet. And so the children interact all the time with, different ideas that they might have or may want to pursue, and film ideas, book ideas, that sort of thing. Um, I can say that I am their mom, and I brought to the table the talents that I had, and I was willing to pass along whatever they kind of gravitated to while they were growing up, and they've done a good job. They've done. I can't take all the credit. They're both very talented young people. Yep, they are, and determined. And I think they got that from me being so perseverant. So they applaud what I'm doing, what I'm doing now, and I applaud them as well. So yeah, it's a very nice situation.
So are they going to be involved in your next project? Are they going to be a part of it, or do you think that you will continue to sort of say be the flounder and be the center of that story, or do you think you might draw on them?
I think that I already am. When I went back to Icarus, the kids and I have had various meetings where we bounced things off of like, okay, so I'm going to send you this little, we used to call them rushes back in the day
Yeah.
when it was a real film. And so I'm going to send you this little rush, and you take a look and see what you think. And so yes, there's been a lot of interaction and a lot of supportiveness, and, collaboration as far as, well, okay, helping me to hone this movie, and 40 years later, and have it be what I envisioned it to be. Yeah, they've been a good part of that. Good part of it.
I think you managed to also impact the students around you. So this kind of spirit that you've been for your children, you've also shared that with the students. And I completely agree that you have gotten people to talk and to take more risks in the classroom and to stretch their wings. So in many ways, this image of the Icarus is fantastic and suits you so well. Um, so thank you, Suzanne. I hope that we can continue this conversation also in the future and maybe take some of this oral history to the Historical Society or to your birthplace in Windsor. They would love to hear from you, I'm sure.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. And I want to just say thank you to everyone. I have to say thank you to Caddy and Carol and Agnes, Ed, Heather are behind the scenes. It's just wonderful.
Yes. So let me maybe allude to two more events that are coming up. So one of them is already next Tuesday on September 15th at 5 o'clock. There is a special episode of Let's Talk Media. It's called Racial Consciousness in the Media Industry. And it will be featuring Michael Fountain, Akemi Harrison, Tony Franklin, and Mallory Mason, and hosted by Wayne Edwards. And the events of 2020, this is what it says in the summary, have certainly opened a greater awareness of social injustice and systemic racism that has occurred for centuries. Black citizens from all socioeconomic backgrounds have, at some point in their career, been the recipient of bias, or worse, in the workplace. This is no different in the media industry. So this is one event coming up as part of Let's Talk Media. And then in 2 weeks, another badass female filmmaker is on the scene to follow in your footsteps, Agnesh. This is on Thursday, September 24th. Our guest will be Dr. Agnesh Moshi, as she talks about making films that matter. And we have here, as an advertisement in this art-infused episode, we take a journey with physicist Dr. Agnesh Moshi, who marries science and her passions and explorations in filmmaking with the arts and social justice issues. On the menu, there will be servings about the influential importance of stories, how to choose your story, what stories we tell and how we tell them, who the storytellers are, and the potential of innovative storytelling. You can all join us for an evening with an outside the box thinker, interdisciplinary career curator, and also then I have this funny professor. So, I mean, you and Agnes share so many interests about storytelling. So, thank you for being our visionary. Thank you for being our Icarus. And I can only say, all of you out there, stay safe, stay home, wear a mask, and we'll see you on Monday, on Tuesday, excuse me, and 2 weeks from now. So bye bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so